NZ Aerosports, Icarus Canopies, now Gyro. That's right, we've rebranded, and Gyro is our next generation. It honours our founder, as that's the name we knew him by, but Gyro also marks the start of a new chapter. And not to be biased, but it's going to be fucking epic. Long story short, we're more us than ever. So if you're new to the sport, or even a Sky God Ninja Turtle, welcome. I think our valiant leader Lucy, Gyro's daughter, says it best.
And we still got that fuck yeah attitude. Rebrand! Woo!
Rebrand woo indeed, Lucy. Anyway, head over to gyro.com for more info and get amongst you legends.
I was 19, broke, unemployed, and sold my girlfriend's canopy for drug money. So I thought I better sew her a new one. What a sentence, and what a story. This describes the humble yet outrageous beginnings of NZ Aerosports, the home of Icarus Canopies, in the words of our founder himself. From getting a paratrooper toy from his mom, watching parachutes at the DZ as a 6-year-old, jumping off the wharf with a parachute made from bed sheets, doing his first jump at 16, sewing his first canopy on a borrowed machine at 19, and starting to sell parachutes out of a garage in 1986, Paul Gyro Martin had an undying love for the sky. Our company started with one man with the wildest of spirits and a true blue sky dream, a renegade. In the time that Gyro created and ran the Icarus Canopies brand until he passed away in 2017, he pushed everything he had to its limits. We miss him, and we always will. Gyro is the next generation of NZ Aerosports. It honors our founder, of course, because it was the name we all knew him by, but Gyro the rebrand also marks the start of a new chapter, our next jump. Gyro is the space between sound and silence, art and science, chaos and calm. Gyro is a state of epic tranquility that transcends understanding. That moment, in the door, in free fall, mid-swoop, where nothing but the present exists. A perfect balance of euphoria and thrill. Gyro captures our passion for flying and our commitment to designing break-the-fucking-rules canopies that deliver pilots pure, wild flight. Hey gang, so I got a new book out. It's called The Upside of Fear, and it's exactly what you think it's about. It's about the good side of, well, getting scared. In it, we talk not only about the science and biology behind fear, but the psychology as well. And it's not just coming from me, it's coming from some of the best in the sport. Omar Alhigelan, Jeff Provenzano, Maxine Tate, and so many more have contributed their sometimes terrifying stories to the book to help you overcome your fear. So head to the lunaticfringepodcast.com. You're going to find the link to the book there, as well as the other books. It's available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook right now.
Coming straight from the cockpit, it's another episode of Lunatic Fringe with the fucking pilot.
Ready, set, go! Back in the can for another edition of the Lunatic Fringe podcast, and we've got Chloe again because we are deep into this stuff, working through all the different things that skydivers go through in dealing with not the physical side of the sport, but the mental side of it, which we all know, every jumper out there knows, is probably the majority of our sport takes place in our head. So I can't wait to hear what comes up next. I know we're talking about some new stuff that's close to my heart. So over to you, Chloe. How are you?
Thanks, Dean. I'm great. We just had a really nice invasion. It was super cold, but we made it. And with every single day being pretty good weather, I would say. All
Amazing.
planes were great. And yeah, this year was successful on that front, I think. And second year in a row for Alta, having, a week-long outreach, which, from last year to this year, there's also major improvements that I even got to hear feedback from other people who saw me last year out there,
Nice.
Speaking about mental health. And it was the most validating thing, I think. Just hearing that people notice how Alta is also growing was really special for me. And we had, in our last episode, I was talking about the Sky shirts and the partnership with All Option Gravity. And when I put those shirts out there, the first couple of days, people were kind of like inquiring and like, what it was about. We had a couple of people, purchase them. And little by little, when they actually got the chance to hear the functionality of the shirt itself, having the QR code on the back that would lead directly to a consultation page where people can get mental health help. I think that's where people started giving me this, not just positive feedback about the shirt, but wanting to really make a change and, get more involved. So I left with having made more connections, more friendships, more meaningful conversations. And like I said, it was really just so validating that knowing that this intuition that started about 5 or 6 years ago is something that really resonates with everybody else was, it's everything, So I'm excited. Yeah. We're almost sold out of these shirts as well. I mean, by the end of it, I had no sizes for the majority of people. So we're going to be doing a second round just for this. They are limited edition in the sense that I'm going to kind of make several designs just for each year. And that was I'll call it the, 2025, 2026 kind of shirt.
Nice.
But 2026 into 2027 is going to look different. And I'm looking forward to partnering with other brands. I'm looking forward to, pushing the message of Alta onto other forms of wearables that people can also just have the chance to help others in multiple ways, whether it's, water bottles or hats or things like that.
Sure.
It's all for the major cause. And 100% of the proceeds, every single dollar goes into a designated account for the critical injury program so that people who cannot afford or are in locations where their insurance doesn't cover, crisis intervention and emotional support, I can actually just show up and do the work and it's covered for a certain amount of time. So as long as we get that, that pot filled every time, we have enough to really fuel support for people who need it.
I mean, that's awesome because I'm sure most people feel this way. Every time I see a GoFundMe for a jumper, it's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking because obviously we're in a sport that doesn't have a safety net off the drop zone, so to speak. I mean, there's not much recourse. The old running joke used to be at the drop zone that I started at was that if there was any horrible accident that I was involved in, take my rig off and drag me to the golf course. I mean, and it was funny, but it was also kind of true. I mean, it's pretty horrible that that's the place we're in, and mental health is even lower on the peg for a lot of people, although happily it's starting to change.
Right. I think that there's a major shift in the way people appreciate a confidential space for them to process their own emotions and, just have a person that is unbiased and really not connected to their friends or family, but it's just a neutral source that's just there for them to reflect back.
Sure.
The stigma of mental health, I think, is definitely going down. I've been doing this for 16 years, and ever since COVID, I think that there was a major wave of people recognizing that they would just let this resource into their lives. And when I started, I used to call them unicorns because I would have I remember the first male client that I had, and then it took months to even meet another male. Now it's like the majority of my clients are, I mean, yes, we have a male dominated sport, but the majority of my clients are male. And then there's also females as well. So it's completely different. And I'm so grateful for that. And veterans as well, so I'm very hopeful for where we're going as a community in that regard.
I mean, I think it's become a much more easy to talk about subject for sure. Because back in the day, it was
Hmm.
just quiet whispers in the corner about the next guy you thought was going to go in because he was a little off his
Hmm.
game, so to speak. And now it's a lot closer to a hand on the shoulder, hey, how can I help type of thing, which is
Hmm.
huge. It's
Right,
amazing.
right. Yeah, yeah. The norm, I'm hoping, is going to go towards social responsibility that is just growing. We have it, but I think calling it by that name and saying that, we're all, if we're going to say the word community, we are all socially responsible to at least, either feel the discomfort of I'm worried for someone, or reach out or ask for help to help somebody else. And that's what that QR code really does. It makes it so much easier because when you ask for a consultation, you actually bypass all of the not ambiguity, I'm sorry, all of the procrastination and
Mm,
the kind of like waiting and not being really sure,
mm.
ambivalence, there you go, that it takes. I mean, I've had a person reach out to me 2 years after they actually chatted with me the first time because it took them that long. And that's really, sometimes it really does take a person that long to get connected because they're contemplating. And then there's one good day followed by another good day. And this is kind of what I spent my week at Invasion explaining to people, that it's to make it easier, because the moment that you actually reach out for help, and then I mean, it goes to my phone,
Mm.
right? I get emailed immediately. So I could be speaking to that person same day. And when someone's vulnerable, they're at that's actually an opportune moment,
Mm.
because vulnerability is the most likely time where someone is going to accept help.
Sure.
So it's really critical that, they're in a place where their heart is open, their mind is open, they are feeling their feelings, they're feeling, that kind of desperation or lostness,
Mm.
because then it gives me a chance to actually have the meaningful conversations that make it easier for people to recognize that, they can have this as a source for themselves. So what I would like to see from that QR code being used is either people getting on, it's a short form, so people using it for consultations for themselves because they've been referred by their friends,
Mm.
or for themselves, or people who honestly don't know how to deal with the situation and are asking me questions about what to do in terms of a certain context that they don't know how to navigate. Let's say you have a friend and you're like, I have an issue, I'm worried about my friend. You can still reach out to me
Mm.
and ask those hard questions. And I would love to just be able to walk people through. So
Mm.
that consultation page is just a direct contact form to get through to me, right?
Awesome.
And my clinicians. So yeah,
Awesome.
everyone, please use it.
Awesome. Well, so with that in mind, what particular subject are we going to tackle today?
I think it makes sense to talk about PTSD. I would like to focus specifically on what it is, how it shows up, how we diagnose it clinically, so
Okay.
that people really leave here today with enough information about what it like, if they are having any symptoms, right? How long those symptoms should last for in order to be categorized as PTSD, and then some kind of suggestions to, like, obviously how to get help.
Sure. Well, that's awesome because PTSD is definitely near and dear to my heart and a bunch of people I know. So I'm very interested to hear about it.
Okay, all right. Um,
Let's just dive
would
on
you
in,
like
I
to
guess.
share?
We can, I'm for sure. I mean, mine just stems from a few flights that I had that were incredibly sketchy and stuff like that. And the way that it would manifest itself in me typically, and I'm sure you see this all the time in guys, is anger. Very, very
Mhm,
quick to anger when I know I'm in a situation that was brought about because of
mhm,
sketchy situation in the past. And that's always been my go-to emotion for everything is anger. And it took a long time for me to recognize oh, wait a second, I'm not pissed off at this person. I'm pissed off that I'm in a situation that's bringing up these memories that were scary or whatever it was, you know. And it took a long time for me to recognize that. Had I had someone that could have sat me down and pointed out why I was doing some of the things that I was doing, it would have made the process a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm really glad you actually offered that for everyone and for our conversation, because I think what I'm hearing that is really useful is we can have symptoms that we don't recognize for a long, long time.
Oh, yeah.
We just identify that as like, that's just my baseline,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you get to the place where you can listen and sift through the things that come so normatively to you?
Mm.
And I think that that's where we should go today. And we can talk about that hyperarousal.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, I'd absolutely love to. I mean, it took me years to sort through that because I was, again, doing it on my own for a number of reasons. One, because I didn't know that I had access to sitting down to talk to someone outside of that circle, A, and B, I come from um, the action hero generation, you know, the no fear, keep it to yourself type of stuff. And the only reason that I ever came around to it and clued into it on myself, and I'm not recommending this for anybody listening, but I ate a bunch of mushrooms and went wandering in the woods and had a nice long conversation with myself. And it took that for me to go, oh, and it made so much sense because I was able to remove the emotion and remove the PTSD from PTSD long enough to go, oh, this is what I'm looking at. And it's made a difference for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about PTSD then. I'm going to actually tailor this to our skydiving and base community. So for all of us who are listening, this is literally for the extreme sports community in general. It is for people like us and the things that we experience in the sport. And then I also will generalize it that, you know, things that happen in the sport are not the only instances that obviously cause us to be traumatized. We may have PTSD from our childhood. We may have PTSD from other things outside of skydiving and base in general as adults. So let's get into some of these symptoms, right? So I'll start off with common features. In order to, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that we use, which is a book of guidelines, over decades of research, we've gotten better at figuring out how to diagnose these things. So, you know, when you have PTSD, you have to have symptoms, a certain amount of symptoms over the course of 6 months plus. Before that, if something has acutely happened in your life, you witnessed a plane crash or you witnessed a friend passing. You know, I won't go into the plethora of experiences as to not trigger some listeners, but I want you all to kind of think about just acute moments that can happen. It would not be enough if the symptoms were just for a couple of days, right? It is normative and also actually very healthy to have symptoms like nightmares and, you know, moments of wanting to withdraw for the past couple of days after an event, because, you know, there still is hyperarousal. The brain is absolutely doing its job. You are having emotions, right? But where we call it post-traumatic stress and make it a disorder is where it becomes an actual problem in our lives. So you, Dean, when you explained, you know, I went a long time not recognizing that what I thought was my demeanor was actually a symptom is a prime example of that. And, you know, to humanize myself, I actually understand that too. So I can empathize with that as well.
Sure.
And interpersonally, you know, there's, you know, our partners, our children, our teammates, like there's a lot of things that can happen. So interpersonal dynamics can also start shifting over a while. You know, secondary problems like substance misuse can also happen. There's a lot of things that can happen. So it's when it actually causes a problem that makes it a disorder, right? Before that, we can call it something like an adjustment disorder, which mimics PTSD-like symptoms and depression and anxiety-like symptoms, where the intervention, if it happens a lot sooner, actually won't have long-lasting effects. So that's kind of why we're doing this podcast, because a lot of these things can be processed, and when you get support early on enough, you actually don't develop these symptoms that solidify or calcify over a long period of time.
Sure.
So common features can include intrusive re-experiencing. So what does that mean? That means flashbacks, nightmares. The flashbacks are like you close your eyes and you literally see the actual image. So if you're having any of those experiences, or nightmares having specifically to do with the instance, right, then that can be considered a symptom, right? Avoidance of people or places that remind us of the event. So we don't go to the drop zone anymore. We don't talk to the same people. We really are avoiding. This actually happens when I was a sexual assault advocate in the hospital many years ago at this point. One of the things that would be very common was that like victims and survivors rather would literally not go to the same neighborhood because they couldn't tolerate the re-experiencing that they would imagine would happen, or that they would remember has happened. And so there's this, if left untreated, what happens is, again, that calcification. So you then you have a more rigid association. So the more that you don't go to the drop zone, the more that you don't look at a parachute, the more that you can't look at people swooping, the more that you don't go to exit points, or you don't talk to people at all about base or anything like that. You don't want to get on an airplane. The more that you work on this new relationship with said thing, the more rigid that becomes, and the harder it is to break, because the more believability it has, right? There's more association, so your emotions are going to spike a lot faster. They're going to be much more, they're going to be difficult to negotiate with, right?
Sure.
So again, early intervention is important for that reason. Shifts in mood and cognition, kind of what you were talking about. But, we also have feeling detached, guilt, and numbness. So these are things that, they're also intertwined with grieving. They're in this case, though, they are self-protective mechanisms that, the psyche cannot tolerate, because it cannot understand how this really bad thing could happen. So again, you can get into a swooping accident and not have PTSD to the extent in which I'm describing, right? You could absolutely just be like, okay, I'm going to go back in. I would actually worry a little bit more about the person who's going to want to just jump back in, and that's a different conversation.
Sure.
There's a spectrum of, intensity of how this is experienced, but at the same time, the detachedness, the numbness, you have to think about like, what's the function of that, right?
Correct.
And that's really a self-protective mechanism, which is pretty remarkable, because again, the psyche has your mind has the ability of adaptability. So although it's going to be maladaptive, it's still going to adapt in an unhealthy or unconstructive way, but it's going to try to do certain things that you're not actually choosing to do. It's just kind of a natural process.
Sure.
It's kind of remarkable. Yeah. And here goes that hyperarousal and reactivity, right? So when we say hyperarousal, we're talking about the limbic system. We're talking about your fight or flight that, people kind of know more, I guess, popularly. Your amygdala, your hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, all of these things, they are all working together. I mean, there's other parts of the brain as well, but they're all working together to kind of not take the exact memory, but they're taking sensations and they're meshing them together and making meaning. So again, that calcification, because of that meaning that gets, created over time. But that's why you get the hyperarousal and the reactivity, because something that seems completely unrelated, maybe to the other person in front of you, for you has so much meaning.
Sure.
It means a lot. And that's because of those neural pathways that have actually, shifted to, unfortunately, try to protect you, but it's the psyche's ability to try its best, but our consciousness needs to actually step in and say, okay, well, this is not exactly accurate. It's a trigger, but not a threat.
Sure.
And that would lead to sleep disruption. That's going to lead to irritability in the morning. That's going to lead to irritability throughout the day and chronically. And because of all those things, you then get hypervigilance. And, the hypervigilance piece is the most, I guess, common way of looking at it is the, like kind of looking over your shoulder, where the person who's like, I want you to think of, and this is not even how it works in real life, but I want you to think of like the veteran who comes out of war and then builds the bunker and has like, his AK and he's like sitting behind the door, right? That's never how it actually works.
Right.
But people think of hypervigilance that way. Hypervigilance is actually, well, you come back from war and it just looks like anxiety. It literally just looks like anxiety. It just looks like you're kind of generally worried about things. And when it gets to the point that a person is so used to like having their brain work around the hyper arousal, they're in a constant state, right? So what happens is that the actual acute piece of, trauma, then it sort of loses, like we lose the origin, right? And we sort of build this lifestyle around how we feel internally, and then generally become anxious. We generally become more controlling. We generally become more, hypervigilant in a way where we're particular. And the key here is that we weren't like that before. So now, again, I'm talking about acute trauma, not chronic trauma like child abuse, right? Or domestic violence, where it's constant and it's systemic and it's daily. These symptoms will present in people with chronic trauma as well. But what I'm talking about is for us skydivers and base jumpers who are experiencing something that has immediately happened. Yeah, to just know that, this is how it looks like for us as well. It will look like a little bit more anxiety because you're physiologically aroused, right? Like your brain is informing your body. And so therefore every detail around you is going to be relevant somehow, if that makes sense. I'm speaking kind of hyperbolically.
Does. Well, I mean, just even from my own personal experience, I was aware when I was dealing with it, even though I didn't know to call it PTSD or whatever, but I was no longer starting to get PTSD thinking of the event. I was starting to get PTSD thinking of another bout of PTSD. So I was becoming anxious, worried I was going to get anxious, and it was just this vicious circle. So then that's where the general anxiety and the anger and the mood swings really kicked in, because the entire time I was literally balancing on that fence with the fight or flight response, because I was always worried that something was coming, even though it no longer had a name. So it became very generalized, and that's when it really sucked.
I am so I'm grateful for your articulation in your own experience, because I know that there is someone out there listening that will hear that and say, oh, that makes sense. And that's resonating with me, because that really is how it works. And what I've seen is I have had clients that have started with generalized anxiety or, as kids, and then there's acute trauma. And then what happens is that it actually will manifest itself into a panic disorder or agoraphobia, which is fear of going outside. And, all of these things can snowball. And the other disorders that we have that are anxiety based, because PTSD is an anxiety disorder, right? It's in the category of anxiety. And there are other anxiety disorders that will manifest and kind of like, it's like PTSD is like that potato, and then if you leave the potato without eating it for a while, it starts growing these roots. It's kind of like that, right? So it'll grow these little legs and sort of like appendages and things will be a byproduct of the origin, and just like you said, you'll lose where it came from, and it just sort of becomes reality, and we can go a long time like that. So the main thing that I think we're landing on is, early intervention is key. Without intervention, it doesn't get better. It actually will grow and complexify. Oftentimes it can calcify. It's not permanent. It is PTSD you can't get rid of, right? It is that part is actually permanent, right? Yeah. But there's a lot of things that you could do to manage it and loosen it and soften your responses and reteach the brain. However, if you go a long time without addressing your issues, it is much more difficult to intervene and to actually get the kind of help that would put you in a position where hyperarousal will be like eradicated. You can't really do that because it's very difficult. We're talking about 20 years plus of not having gone to therapy.
Sure.
It's going to be really difficult. Do I believe in clients, mental health and their journeys? Absolutely. But, we do have a cap at some point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, my personal experience, everything that you've said, obviously just dead aligns perfectly. Every bit of it. Okay. And I'm sure there's tons of people listening that align with that very well.
Yeah. So what does this look like for us? Common patterns reported to me are people stop engaging in jumping, or they stop engaging for long periods of time. They leave entirely, they switch disciplines, maybe they don't do I stopped swooping. I stopped pragmatically as well, but I stopped because I was traumatized from what I experienced, and it's just not something. I still deal with a flashback if I think about it, and I can't justify going back to swooping. So I went to wingsuiting, and I love canopy piloting, for high pulls and things like that, and relative work. But it's just not something that I was able to do because, of wanting to build a family, of wanting to do these things. I have anchors. So these protective factors are something that are not PTSD related. They're more pragmatic and emotionally related, where I feel responsible to being in other places. Sure. But if you really ask me, to even do a 90 at this point, and be on a katana that I was, I'm probably going to have, several jumps where I'm experiencing flashbacks that I would have to work through in order to get past it. It is a choice because it doesn't actually affect the rest of my life. So it's not PTSD. You know what I mean? I don't have a disorder in that sense. It's not really affecting anything in my life. But if I were to continue trying to, get into canopy piloting and become that, I think that that's where it would be an issue because I would have to deal with it more regularly.
Sure.
So not coming around the community as much as well. And to be clear, of course, it is natural to diversify your hobbies. It's actually healthy to diversify your hobbies, But the difference is that there's an acute incident, and that's what causes the departure. And then the acute incident is for 6 months or more experienced with all of the things that we spoke about above, right? So, you have all of these kind of features that are clinically significant, and they don't stop, you don't get help, and they don't get better.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Again, that fits real well.
Right. So how do we understand this? Again, through the lens of anxiety. The common marker for all of this is avoidance. If we push through as to not go, full MIA on showing up at the drop zone, but we don't feel 100% light and happy, right? We feel a little off. Maybe it feels like you're sliding into this forced participation. You're like, okay, I'm here. You kind of get excited, or you feel like you can handle it. You go to the drop zone. You're like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to be happy. I'm going to be around my people. I'm going to try to feel like I can connect. I'm dealing with this numbness, but it'll get better like maybe an hour or two in. I'll be around my friends. You're kind of forcing the participation, but you're also emotionally shut down. And that can become another way of ignoring the need to process what's going on internally. Naming your emotions and processing them are two very different things. Most people don't even really get to the point of naming emotions, right? Like they don't incorporate that as part of their daily practice. But even more so, people are not actively processing them, which is, it needs to be either taught or you have to learn how to do that, right? You have to learn how to feel it in your body somatically and understand the tools and how to use them. So, this emotional shutdown is something that we are historically, I've always said it, an avoidant bunch. So because we're avoidant people, we know how to mitigate stress, we know how to mitigate all these factors, it can be very easy to push away the actual emotional shutdown and the numbness. But it's really a cue to understand what's going on internally. If the detachment continues, which is a defense mechanism, like we said, where the psyche it's still trying to avoid, even if you try to force participation, irritability, depression, anxiety, that's what begins to surface or intensify. So we just touched upon that and what that really looks like. But as we see, like that potato will grow roots. It'll grow little potatoes on the side of it, So I don't know how potatoes work. I think that's how it works. But kind of like that. It sort of like grows these little arms.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And maybe in today's podcast, if we have time, I don't want to make any promises, but maybe we'll kind of get into some other things about substance misuse and coping strategies that are not the most healthy for us. And, I think a lot of us can understand, drinking and, recreational or hard narcotics, painkillers, all of these kinds of things, but also other kinds of things that we can consider as substances and addiction that can form. We don't ask what's wrong with it. We ask what is right with it. What is its function? And oftentimes when people are connecting themselves to these external substances as a form of coping, the origin is a pain that comes from a very particular place that has nothing to do with how that drug, and I'm using that as a general term, makes them feel.
Sure.
It's not because, I really like what alcohol does and I enjoy the alcohol, right? Like I'm just drinking a cocktail and I enjoy the flavor, right? Obviously. It goes really to a very particular specific root. And I think a lot of people at that point are very scared to talk. But of those who do make that step, it is one of the most courageous steps because you have to think about all of that calcification that we talked about. And at that point, someone's in a position where they're open to actually getting the help at that point in their life. That's a real act of courage, right?
I mean, it's in general, having to try and deal with anything like that, especially in our sport where everything is so high energy and high happy and high this and everybody's super amped up and having a great time, it's very difficult to be the one to go, hey, but I'm freaking out and I'm not enjoying this. And I know this is my community, but I kind of hate every bit of this right now. It's real tough to voice that. And it's real easy to just pretend.
Right. Also, just like you said, when you can go a long time without even recognizing it.
Oh, yeah.
There are times where I get on the drop zone. I might have I might have an anxious episode of my own, and I get to the drop zone. That oxytocin, that neurochemical that releases, that is the feel good, the bonding hormone, right? You hear Chloe, hi, oh my God. And immediately all of those hugs, because hugs do release that chemical, will make me forget. And I will actually feel like when I get onto the drop zone that, okay. You know what? When I was in my house, I think it was just in my head. I just needed to get out of the house. And that might be a little bit of it, but at the same time, without intending on it, it can help me avoid what I'm actually experiencing because I'm not processing the emotion. So because I know this, I then have to go do the work, at night when I come home, and I will speak to my loved ones, or I'll speak to, my own therapist, or I'll speak to whoever is out there for me that is helpful, even just by writing it out. So it's not like we're doing this all of the time to ourselves, right? We're not bad, and we're not actively trying to lie to ourselves, right? It's just this kind of we have this remarkable capacity for self-protection, and in it is a deep need for coherence. And we don't know always how to listen to that, but the psyche is, I'll kind of get into this a little bit actually. So I'm going to sound like my big Greek fat wedding, my fat big Greek. I'm Greek. I don't know. What,
Big fat
what is
Greek
it?
wedding.
Big fat Greek wedding. Is that
Yep,
it? Okay,
that's
cool.
it.
I've seen it so many times. My dad, when he was alive, he was like, I don't know. This Windex thing, he's like, this is such an insult to the Greek people. I mean, we made democracy, and we made this, and we made science, and all of the language comes from in medicine. And I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, Chloe, Fabrice me, put Fabrice. And then I was like, Dad, so you don't use Windex, but you use Febreze, right? Like, it's the same thing. And he's like, but this is such a good product. I was like, oh my God, you see?
Yep.
So I'm gonna do the whole thing like it's a Greek word.
Okay.
All right. So but it is. I promise. So the word psyche, it's a Greek word, and it's often translated, it's translated to soul. But in psychology, we have a practical use for it. It's more practically to mean the mind and inner experience. So I want you to think of psyche, which is psyche, soul. Inside of you is this kind of mechanism. And, we all have different ways of calling it. And everybody's interpretation is open and on the table, at least in my eyes, right? In ours.
Sure.
But it matters because the mind is not separate from the body, right? The mind and the body are connected. In recent years, I think a lot more people are, understanding how that is, and we're talking about it. It's popular. Stress and emotion doesn't travel through mystery. It's not like through mysticism. It just doesn't immediately happen. There might be some listeners that are hearing this for the first time. I know that there's people in our community that are not. But there are some people that are, that need to hear this, and I would like to explain it.
Sure.
So stress and emotion, when your brain understands, it fires like electricity it fires, neurons fire in your brain, and that sends a signal. Think of your brain as actually a series of organs. They're actually, researchers are discovering that the brain is not just one organ, but that it's actually its own kind of, it's its own kind of entity that has multiple types of organs. Like the amygdala does very different things, and they all work synergistically with like the other parts of our brain. But because they are designated to doing certain things, like the liver does certain things, the stomach does certain things, right? They all have certain jobs. The brain kind of works in a way where, for the most part, they can be designated having certain jobs, but they communicate much more connectedly and fluidly with each other. So the hippocampus is going to also, have an influence, not just in how we store memory and the fact that we can recall. They won't be exact, but they'll be like the sensations. But then there's also other parts of our brain that will fire and kind of assist in the same processes, right? So all of this is where our body, when it tenses up, is an assignment or a directive from the brain, because it is processing what we understand as fear or sadness or disapproval or guilt, rejection, all of these kinds of things are both are, there's a trifecta here. There is your cognitive, right? So what you're thinking, what you're emotionally experiencing, and then what you're physically feeling. And it will happen, very quickly. But that trifecta is happening because the brain is processing and it has stored certain things to like associate from our external world. So it's not really a mystery that we feel this way or that, oh, I can just push this away, because everything is connected by all of these multiple systems, right? So there's a lot of physiology that actually, goes into our care and understanding ourselves. And they move through, like we said, these well-known systems like the nervous system, hormones, inflammation in the body, the gut. Chronic stress can show up as digestive system in our digestive system, like our digestive tract.
Sure.
So you can have gastritis, you can have certain things that come from chronic stress, sleep disruption, shifts in appetite and metabolism. That's usually what we see in depression. Eating too much or eating too little. Survival mechanism, right? Our hunger goes up. Our hunger cues are also from the brain. And that's going to affect everything else. And then what we eat when we feel a certain way, because the brain is acting this way, is comfort. It's comforting. And so therefore, everything is just kind of becomes like this generalized experience, right? So it's, blood sugar regulation and elevated blood pressure.
Yeah, I know that that there are so many physiological effects for stuff like this that it's not even funny. And I've experienced my fair share as well, that it again took a lot of time for me to figure out, oh, this is why this is happening. This is why that's happening. So it's something.
Yeah. So I'm going to speak metaphorically here, but most people recognize this feeling that when something's off, some part of you eventually like taps you on the shoulder. And that's the psyche, right? That's the part of you that is like your subconscious. And it taps you on the shoulder, and then it taps you again, and it continues tapping you. Most people dismiss these notifications. That's how I explain it to my clients, is that you, because you know how to mitigate, certain thoughts that will not be helpful for you when you're doing your high octane, high risk activities where you have to focus. And that's what gives you pride. That's what gives you excitement. You're really used to that way of thinking, right? When your psyche is speaking, like you are having those extra hunger cues, or you're not eating, because your adrenal glands are actually secreting a lot more adrenaline, and you're actually in fight or flight, or you feel shut down, you feel numb. You don't necessarily find the things at the drop zone funny anymore, or you're like, hey, and you're not really meaning it. You're not really meaning the excitement. All of these things, that is your psyche, metaphorically, right? Tapping you on the shoulder. It is literal cues telling you, hey, there are certain things that are happening here. And not speaking metaphorically, but literally, that's your actual brain that is experiencing this, just like a stomach ache. But because our mind, the way that we experience it is very rarely experienced through like nerves that we connect with emotional or mental anguish. We're not having like a headache every time we have to go to the therapist, right? The way that if you have a stomach ache, or if you have heart palpitations that are irregular, you go to the cardiologist, or you go to the, your GI. It's not going to be so obvious.
Sure.
So we have to make the step to make it that you really are learning about what are the cues, because your brain, unfortunately, is not just going to give you a headache. And sometimes it will, right? Sometimes you'll have a headache, but it won't be every single time. It'll just be like, oh, I have a headache, But this isn't us lying to ourselves. We are, again, protecting.
Sure.
Okay, and so to reiterate, again, metaphorically, when the psyche cannot be listened to, it tends to show up in other places, like our stress, symptoms, compulsions, reactivity, and shutdown, right? That doesn't mean the mind causes every illness. But it does mean that when you carry internally what has a way of surfacing until it's addressed, it's something that's going to stick around, and it's going to, like we said, tap you on the shoulder.
Sure.
So therapy is less about polishing a person's persona, right? It's not about fixing you. It's more about creating a space for the real thing underneath that needs to be examined without panic. So when you go into therapy, it's that you're going in there either early on enough or at the time in which you realize the things that are happening are not part of your demeanor, but
Sure.
that they are symptoms. And you're learning to let go of the way in which you are showing up. So that anger, that shutdown, the withdrawal, those the substance misuse, all of those things you're learning to let go of and to understand what safety looks like again. That's basically what therapy is supposed to do. It's supposed to create a space where you can recognize what kind of behaviors and thoughts that you have around that have stemmed from the trauma and separate that from your actual self. It's not a polishing of self and a fixing of self. It's a separation from your symptoms and the self.
Sure.
Yeah, you're extracting it. It's kind of like you're dislodging this stake that's at your side.
Makes complete
And
sense.
yeah. And some people aren't ready for that, and that's okay, right? Like some people are really not in a place where they're too scared. It's too familiar. They've actually taken their symptoms and they've held onto them, and they're holding onto them like a safety blanket. They're holding onto them like parts of themselves that they can't let go of. There's grieving, deep grieving there. It's not a character flaw. It comes from fear. It comes from stigmatizing yourself for the things that I think deep down inside people know what's really going on. They know their honest truth.
Sure.
And there's shame, maybe even bad prior experiences of getting help.
Sure.
That's also a really big one. Or having spoken to people and been, kind of let down. It's, or simply not having the bandwidth or the safety to go there,
Sure.
because of that long lasting cyclical pattern
Sure.
that they're in. They're actually exhausted.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, for me, it
yeah.
became not only exhausting, but everything changed. All my routines basically altered just enough to make room for this unwanted visitor that had moved in. And that's exactly what it was. It was okay, now I have to do things this way because I'm dealing with this shit. And it literally was just a remaking. All right, how do I continue down this path when one of my tires just blew out, but I can't pull over to fix it? If that makes any sense as an analogy. And it literally is, okay, instead of replacing the tire, I'm just going to have to learn how to drive without any rubber on that wheel. And that's exactly what I did for years and years. And I know other people do that as well. And that's, I think, one of the tough things, and one of the reasons for guys as well, is you get into skydiving, which is an inherently, for guys, kind of a macho sport. And then you throw in the attitudes and the bravado that a lot of guys walk around with in a sport like skydiving. And then all of a sudden you have a humbling experience and you don't feel like one of the cool kids anymore. And you don't feel like one of the tough guys anymore. So who the fuck do you turn to have that conversation? And for me, that many years ago and in the environment that I was in, there isn't anybody. So it's okay, I need to learn to live with this. And that sucks. You shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can invite someone into the work, but you can't force them into it, right?
Sure.
You can't make someone see what they can't see.
Sure.
I give this image of the rainbow, and I'm like, okay, well, you can see all the colors of the rainbow, but what if I told you that there's a color that's extra to Roy G. Biv that you can't see?
Right.
And I want you to go find this smorage, right? This blurple, right?
Right.
And people are like, well, I mean, I can only see what I can see, right? And then in therapy, what ends up happening is that like I actually see transformations after a year, and then after 2 years, it's remarkable because that's really when you start celebrating. It's the most amazing thing to watch someone blossom and make these realizations for themselves and use their insight. I can't give a person insight, like I always say, but I will walk with them as they are exercising insight. This is all about what you're not exercising and realizing that you have a lot more capability and actually a lot more capacity to lean into the scary thing and do the scary thing, to talk about it and to let go of your coping strategies that aren't working for you, and to let go of your maladaptive thinking and the social isolation and the anger and the depression and the anxiety, and let go of all of these things, much more than you think. It's only uncomfortable for the first couple of steps, actually.
Sure.
And what people are afraid of is this long drawn out discomfort that they're going to experience and the catastrophe that's going to ensue if they let go of, like you're saying, that bravado or the numbness or the facade that they put on for themselves. If they let go of that, then really bad things are going to happen from here on out and forever. And that's not true, right?
Sure.
It's just that it's going to be uncomfortable for the first couple of steps and the first couple of times that someone tries this new thing of vulnerability or honesty or gentleness. And then it becomes natural. We have this incredible capacity to be adaptive. This is exactly how this problem started, right? PTSD is like the disorder part of it is because of adaptability, right? I believe in plasticity, right? I believe in the brain's ability to shift and to transform depending on its environment and to try to seek our safety, so when someone's ready, it really does land differently. And that's why I don't ever really, it's unethical first and foremost to ever solicit, for therapy. So I'll never go up to someone and be like, hey, I think you should come see me, right?
Right.
Like I can't do that, right? But what I could do is, continue, in our work, me and you, Dean, like doing these kinds of conversations where we let people know that, hey, this is kind of what you can look out for, right?
Sure.
So, and with that, I'll say that psychological trauma is not simply what happens to us, right? Trauma is not what happens to you. It's not trauma is not the impact or the strike. It's not the breaking of your bones. It's not the divorce or the car accident. That's not trauma. That's traumatic.
Sure.
Those moments are moments that create this very intense memory, right? Clinically, trauma is what happens inside of us afterward.
Sure.
It's when the psyche is wounded and then continues, persists, and it's the imprinting, the shift, the total shift, using anxiety as a mechanism to protect.
Sure.
And it's the way that the nervous system and the mind keep responding as if the danger is still present. So that's trauma. Trauma is the thing that lives inside, that is just really has nothing to do with the origin, which is actually why, like the example that you gave, where it became generalized in your life, we actually lose the source, right? Because when trauma lives in us, we don't really think about like, oh, it's really about this one thing. That's not really it. It's that because we're adaptable, we've adapted to now being this way, and we think, well, this is who I am.
I mean, that's exactly what happened with me. I would have to adjust behavior and adjust the way I thought of things in order to get through it. And then you started adjusting everything else to make room for the initial adjustments. And then it all just becomes this shift all the way down the line. And it does end up affecting everything.
Right. Right. Metaphorically, think of it this way. It's like taking a bite out of an apple, right? You break the skin, I remove a piece, I take a bite out of an apple, and the apple it's not exactly the same as it was before, right? It's different. It's been changed. That's what trauma can do, right? It reshapes us. And this is why you cannot get rid of your trauma, but you could soften your PTSD symptoms, and you can learn to rewire the symptomology as opposed to the actual trauma, obviously, right? You cannot go back in time and make that thing go away.
Right.
And oftentimes you actually don't want to, because when PTSD happens, right, the disorder part of it happens, is it Newton? Oh my God. Whoever's listening, I'm sorry. Newton, Bernoulli? No, it's Newton. It's Newton.
Apple fell out of the tree, Newton?
Equal reaction, positive. Oh my God.
Every
This is
action
so
has
bad.
an equal and opposite reaction.
Guys, I swear, I went to psychology. This is why. Sorry for. I want everyone who's either like listening to this podcast, who's driving or who's cleaning their house or just has me in the background for some white noise or whatever to start laughing at me. It's fine. You can even like message me and, and crack some jokes, because that was embarrassing. But yes.
If you want to make it good, you need to make your next promo code Newton. I'm just saying.
Oh man. I hope this one doesn't stick.
No.
But anyway, but think about it this way, right? Think about it like, so with equal amount of conviction to protect ourselves psychologically, to protect our psyche using a trauma response, the flip side to that is post-traumatic growth. So that same conviction, you can take every single point of wisdom, every single point of psychological piece of education, right? That you understand, how does this work clinically? And you can use it to not only rewire you emotionally, but to yet again change you the way that it has changed you in the first round, but for good. You can take your trauma and you can recycle it into something completely brand new. Right? So you can take what happened to you that was traumatic and then make meaning and reshape that meaning, reform it, and use it in a way that it looks like, I think I already used the word, but wisdom.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and that's kind of the point of all of it, right? Is to grow from something and not shrink away from it. So for everybody listening, two things as we wind things down. For those that are kind of on the fence and wondering, should I talk to somebody about this or not? What are some cues, some definite cues? I know you said that stuff that's happening for more than 6 months becomes what you would consider PTSD. For those people listening, what should they be thinking about? Is it time that I talk to somebody? Obviously, they have to make that decision for themselves, but what are some very common markers that if somebody listed these things, you'd go, oh yeah, that person should probably talk to someone? Like, what would those be?
Yeah. So you definitely want to look at, essentially we look at it in terms of 4 different clusters, right? So you want to look at it as intrusive thoughts. If you're having intrusive thoughts, so those are your flashbacks and your nightmares. You're having avoidance of people, places. You're having actually avoidance of even the thoughts, right? So the avoidance of even just the mere where your thought of the discipline that you are in or the place, you just kind of push it away. So if you are noticing that you're pushing things away, you're protecting, right? So I want you to kind of think about like, the disorder is an attempt to protect, but it is gone haywire and it's gone awry, right? So if you're trying to protect and you're in protective mode and you're doing things where you're noticing that you're feeling like you're in defense of something, you have to ask yourself what's going on, right? Because this is about like, yes, I can go through a traumatic event, but can I get myself back to safety?
Sure.
Instead, what PTSD does is that it is, oh, I've gone through a traumatic event, I'm not safe, so therefore I have to be on high alert.
Sure.
Okay, so then you look at negative changes in mood and cognition. So we have your guilt, you have your negative beliefs, your worldview changes, your detachment, like detachment from even feeling like things are real.
Sure.
Depersonalization, derealization is something that happens where you don't feel that things are real. You don't feel that this is real life. That's when PTSD is actually very, very intense. I absolutely strongly urge someone that if you are looking at the world around you and it does not feel real to you, please reach out to me. It's temporary. It is a scary sensation. It's treatable, though. I want to say that. And the last is altered arousal, right? That's the brain's activity. So reactivity, irritability, hypervigilance, sleep issues. These symptoms must last. They definitely have to last over a month, but significant distress and impairment for a diagnosis, it's gone on for a long, long time. We don't want you to feel like you have to wait where it's like, oh, let me just give it a month or let me give it 6 months or something like that. If it's gone on for past a month, then definitely reach out for help. But even before that, if you've gone through something, hey, guess what? More likely you will transition to post-traumatic growth sooner and more resiliently and be able to, even develop a deeper sense of empathy and a deeper sense of resilience and actual gratitude and all of the other things that happen on the flip side of this a lot faster and more intensely if you reach out for help sooner.
So we ended up with a few technical difficulties on Chloe's end, but we basically got to the end of it. The next one we're going to be talking about chronic injury and dealing with, chronic pain, whether it's from, a traumatic injury or just long-term abuse like I and so many jumpers have put themselves through. So that's going to be next time coming up, talking with Chloe from Alta. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and we'll look forward to the next round and talking about stuff that we all care about. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Lunatic Fringe podcast brought to you as always by, not as always, actually. Brought to you now by Gyro. Formerly known as NZ Aerosports, you'll head to gyro.com for their next level line of canopies. By Pussfoot, the Extreme Sports Collective. Head over to pussfoot.com to check it out. By Summit Parachute Systems, check out summitparachutesystems.com to talk to Jarrett Martin and the gang about kick-ass pilot rigs, rigging courses, and more. By Flyaway Indoor Skydiving, go to flyawaytn.com and check out all the cutting-edge stuff to come. By Pure Spectrum CBD, head to purespectrumcbd.com to check out their wide range of CBD products. And as for us, head to the lunaticfringepodcast.com to listen to any of the hundreds of episodes currently available, hit the link for our YouTube channel, pick up your copy of the Lunatic Fringe book or The Accidental Stripper, and get a sneak peek at upcoming guests. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.